the hard work. I'm also going to talk about some things that make us feel like we were directly a part of the American Civil Rights Movement of the 1950s and 60s. And I also want to speak directly to the piece that if given the blessing and opportunity to be the next DNC chair, I'm going to get down on the ground with voting rights, civil rights groups, as well as progressive and liberal leaning Americans of this country. Do the hard work, go into the houses of worship and where secular communities meet to be about the business of grassroots organizing and sustaining the party. I have posted on my website a 7-point plan. As many of the other candidates have talked about, a 50-state District of Columbia and all U.S. territory strategy, data-driven, research-based, and targeted messaging and marketing, passage of the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act and Freedom to Vote Act. The Democratic Party must be about the business of getting involved in litigation. Democrats retaking the South is going to be key to unlocking the door of liberation for this nation, as well as a youth movement to get all youth registered to vote across this nation, as well as we prepare for the 2030 census and reapportionment. Furthermore, let me add this. America needs an injection of economic hope for all people. Under new leadership, we will fight on the behalf of all families and the most loyal constituencies of the party, the beloved community, and to bring about real and sustainable change. There's always been an underclass in this nation. The American economy was built on free labor. Underserved and underrepresented groups have been linked to poverty since America's inception. Low wealth has lasting and long-term consequences even after an individual has risen the economic ladder. Poverty is not limited to the economy. Therefore, a socio-political policy is needed to address the issues from a broader perspective. As a party in rebirth, we must bring centrist, liberals, and conservative Democrats together around the issue of eradicating poverty according to realistic and strategic timetables. Poverty reduction has a correlation to long-term economic prosperity at the microeconomy and macroeconomy levels. We must do more to create stability, security, and opportunity for current and future generations. It is going to take a serious and concerted force to pull the impoverished out of their condition. The message of wealth accumulation is going to have to be taught by parents and in the pulpit, in schools and in the streets, from the womb to the tomb. That is the end of my opening statement.
Thank you so much, Quintessa. I have a couple questions for you now, and to enable more of them, I hope you can answer them in about 1 or 2 minutes each. First one, what do you plan to do to reduce the influence of corporate interests and lobbyists in the party?
Since Citizens United came down, we have been in a uproar as a party and as a nation with the infiltration of PAC money, super PAC money. And what it is going to take is us, whomever our consultancy class is going to be, our accountants, our CPAs, whoever is a part of the financing piece, our financial directors, they are going to have to see, one, look and identify what corporations are actually giving. There has to be an intentional assessment of who the individual donors are, if they are maximizing their giving, to return those monies if they do come into our coffers, as well as being unwilling, sign the pledges, make the necessary statements in order for those monies not to come into the Democratic National Committee, as well as local, state, and federal races. What that will look like, specifically, we have to do those hard things.
Thank you so much. Next question. Do you support the current rule which provides that the chair shall appoint up to 75 at-large members, or do you support a bylaw change that would provide for the election of the at-large members, especially to allow the diversity caucuses to nominate at-large members to provide for proportional representation? One way or another, why or why not?
I want to say this to all those that are running for any seat for the DNC. Not one vote has been cast. Let me say that again. Not one vote from the 448 DNC members has been cast. This is an equal level playing field. The rules are transparent and equitable for all people to walk down this path to represent not just the Democratic Party nationally, but well as internationally. We are the definition and greatness of American values. And what is going to have to happen over the next 4 years, 14 years, and 40 years is for us as a party to be at the center, to be at the heartbeat of what matters to this country and for the sustainment and fulfillment of America. What that looks like, yes, I recognize that there are 75 members that the DNC chair is able to select to sit on the DNC. Is that the most proportional number? We'll have to look at the data. We'll have to have some individualized conversations with those individuals now. But also there's a patriarchy in place in the DNC. There's a hierarchy in place with the DNC. There are also some gatekeeping and lack of transparency that is happening within the DNC. Not to compare, but just simply to state some facts. Some believe that this race is locked down in their favor because certain individuals have endorsed their campaigns. But I'm here to tell you all that a new day is going to have to be dawned after this election on February 1st, period. So whether the DNC chair selects 75 or 40 or 10 individuals to be at large, whether that looks like an election for each of those at-large members to go through this exact same process as us, whether that looks like a bylaws change for a more inclusive, fair, transparent process, I'm open to all of those things. I will not sit at the top of the spear as if I'm the only one that will be making decisions. All voices will be brought to the table. Everyone has value. And then we will make an intentional, concerted effort to determine what is the best path for us to go forward as a party in all decisions. Also, and I'm going to wrap it up because I know Miss Sandra told me to keep this to 1 minute, but I can't help it. I'm a preacher's grandchild. So you all know I can be a little bit winded and I'm a little preachy sometimes myself. But I'll say this much. No one is going to fight harder than Dr. Quintessa Hathaway against this Trump machine. I told you all at the very beginning of my opening statement that this is the meeting that I've been waiting for. Sometimes the campaign is going to feel like we're coming back to the days of the civil rights movement. And there's a term that I've coined as the second civil rights movement. We're going to bring that exact same type of energy. I consider myself a student of Kingian history and philosophy, and we're going to fire this thing all the way up. Take the Democratic Party onward, forward, upward, and outward forevermore.
Thank you, Dr. Hathaway. Very much appreciate your remarks. Now I'd like to hand the mic over to my co-host from Roots Action, Sam Rosenthal. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks so much, Sandra. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name's Sam Rosenthal. I'm the political director at Roots Action, and it's my pleasure to introduce our next candidate. Welcome to Ken Martin, candidate for DNC chair. Ken is currently serving his 7th term as chairman of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party. He's been leading a state party that hasn't lost. It was the one blue wall state that held strong this past election. He's also the president of the Association of State Democratic Committees, and he serves as a vice chair of the DNC. Ken started his political work in 1990 as an intern for the late great Minnesota Senator Paul Wellstone, and we're very happy to have him here tonight. So welcome, Ken.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's so great to be with all of you today. Look, I'm running for DNC chair because we need a workhorse to reform and rebuild the Democratic Party, not just for the next election, but for the next 10 years. In my job leading the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party since 2011, I've gone 25-0 in statewide races and secured 2 trifectas, which, it's not just about winning, right? Winning allows us to actually pass legislation that improves people's lives. And we've passed one of the strongest progressive agendas in the nation, as you all know. And in my job overseeing our state parties at the national level, I've written historic plans to organize in all 57 states and territories and achieve victories in red, purple, and blue states. Through it all, I've managed to become a prolific grassroots fundraiser and campaigner while maintaining my values. Under my DNC, we will launch a permanent campaign. That means we will roll out 365-day grassroots organizing in every zip code in this country. And it means we will expand on the 57 state party strategy that I wrote. Now, look, at the core, I'm an organizer. That's what people know me as. And I'm going to bring organizing principles back to our national party. Next, at my DNC, we will break the consultant industrial complex and engage in a no-holds-barred branding and identity project. We have incredible, talented, and lived experience across our party who are totally untapped. These folks understand that voters in this modern media and information ecosystem and are a step ahead of everyone else. And finally, my DNC will rebuild and restore our Democratic coalition by focusing on an agenda that brings us together. One of the biggest red flags facing our party is that the perceptions Americans have of the 2 major political parties has switched. Today, the majority of Americans now believe that the Republican Party best represents the interests of the working class and the poor, and the Democratic Party is the party of the wealthy and the elites. And sure enough, the only 2 groups that we overperformed with were college-educated voters and wealthy households. That is a damning indictment on our party brand. We lost a lot of ground with voters in 2024, including Black and brown voters, including rural voters, Latino voters, women, working class voters, as I mentioned. There is a dismissive notion, by the way, that the words working class are a code for white voters. That's not the case. All of you know that working class voters are Black, brown, and white people working harder than they ever have before and falling behind and feeling like our party doesn't give a damn about their lives. They're all disconnected from our party. The future of our party is focusing on a multiracial, multi-generational coalition of working people in every state, in every community, and every zip code, and standing up and fighting for them. My old boss, Paul Wellstone, used to say that you should never separate the life you lead from the words you speak. You see, people see politicians from both parties talk a big game about making people's lives easier or better, but when those same folks get power, they don't use it. They sit on it. And what good is banking political power if you don't use it to make a difference in people's lives? That will change under my national leadership. Look, after the 2016 election, I helped champion many of the Unity Reform Commission proposals on the Rules and Bylaws Committee, including being the author of the superdelegate reform that passed. No party chair and none of our party leaders should have their thumbs on the scale. I have been a long supporter of reform to democratize and open up the Democratic Party. As I like to say, I represent the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party. As Democrats, our relationships need to be built on hopes and dreams and shared values. Our vision needs to extend to 2030, 2035, and beyond, and our strategies need to be based on the emerging targets of tomorrow instead of what's worked in the past. People are sick of the status quo from Democrats. Unlike some of my opponents, I don't have billionaire donors directing my campaign. My mom had me, her first kid, when she was just a teenager, 15 years old. She was raising 4 kids by the age of 20. She was a single parent, and we faced some tough times in and out of shelters. Yet we always were and still are a family that believes in the promise of America. I was the first in my family to get a college degree. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I went to a state school. I don't rub elbows with the Hollywood elites. I rub elbows with people in labor halls and church basements. Donald Trump, for all the pain that he will ultimately bring to people, represented an enticing rejection of the status quo. But he's going to use his power to engage in revenge and political retribution. That's not going to help the folks who voted for him. We need to pick up the pieces, restore this party for the sake of our country and for all the people who once believed in us, still believe in us, and even if they don't believe in us, are counting on us to make a difference in their lives. The work starts now, and I look forward to doing it all with you. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Ken. And as with the first candidate, we just have a couple quick questions for you. So the first, similar to a question we heard last round, but what's your plan to reduce the influence of corporate interests in the party? And not just corporate interests, but the dark money PACs that we see who are active within the party, not just supporting Democrats, but supporting particular Democrats against others. What can we do to curb the influence of these outside interests?
Yeah, I mean, first off, we need to make sure we call out the dark money in our politics, and it's corrosive. It's having a negative impact. It's turning people off, right? These billionaire donors and these large corporations who are trying to essentially subvert the will of the people, they do it by buying people off, right? And you know what? We as a party need to make sure that we are only taking money from people and entities that share our values. I commit to you that the DNC will not take money from people, corporations, or others that are union busting, as an example, or from corporations and others that are preying on the least amongst us and the vulnerables in our communities. The reality is we have to stand up to dark money. We have to stand up to corporations and billionaires. They already have too much power. We need to then invest in making sure that we have a lot of our small dollar programs are established so that we don't have to rely on big contributions from billionaires and high net worth donors, right? The third thing we need to do, in my opinion, is speak with a very loud voice as a party. Make sure that we are talking about this, calling out Democrats who are receiving dark money and bad money from corporations, and make sure that we're calling them out. We should only be taking money from people who share our values and who are committed to lifting up the voices of our party and living our values each and every day. Last thing I'll say on this is this. We have to be standing side by side with those who want to end Citizens United, get corporate money out of politics, overhaul our campaign finance system, and return the power to grassroots donors. That's my philosophy. There's a lot more we could do with that, of course. We certainly need to raise money, but we're not going to raise money by giving up on our values.
Great, thanks so much. And one more question that's come up in the chat a couple of times, actually. And this is a progressive audience, so they have to put this question to you. But would you support Medicare for all, single-payer Medicare for all, as a push within the party if you were in the chair position?
Yeah, I mean, here's what I would say. We have I've been to Taiwan. I've been to other countries that have a single-payer healthcare system. It is obscene that we have a for-profit healthcare system where people are making money off of people who are dying and off of the sick. It's ridiculous. We need to get to a system in this country where people don't have to worry about healthcare, where we have universal healthcare, where it's a single-payer system. And there's lots of different models on a single-payer system. You all know that, right? But we need to get the profit motive out of our healthcare system. People should not be making money off of people who are dying in this country. So, yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ken Martin, for being here. And I'm going to pass it back now to Sandra. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Sandra, I think you're muted.
Okay, yes, I want to welcome, thanks again, Sam. I want to welcome Martin O'Malley. He's also a candidate for DNC chair. Martin O'Malley ran for the Democratic nomination in the 2016 presidential cycle. He served as governor of Maryland and as mayor of Baltimore. And most recently, he served as commissioner of the Social Security Administration from 2022 to 2023. Welcome, Martin.
Hey, thank you, Sandra. Thank you very, very much for doing this forum, and it's an honor to be here with all of you. As Sandra said, my name is Martin O'Malley. I come from the state of Maryland, the blue flame of Democratic hope, where we just elected a new senator in Angela Alsobrooks, the very first African-American senator, first African-American woman senator, both from our state. When I served as governor, we accomplished a lot of really important and progressive things. We were the first state to pass a living wage. We were the first state to defend at the ballot, after passing it in the legislature, marriage equality. We passed the DREAM Act so that immigrant kids could actually get in-state tuition if they got into the University of Maryland. We banned combat assault weapons and required licensing for the purchase of any guns. And we were the first state south of the Mason-Dixon line to repeal the death penalty. Took us 3 tries, but we did it. I share all of those things to underscore another very, very important truth. We were able to do those things. We were able to build our Democratic majority because of 2 reasons. One, we built up the party, but more importantly, we always communicated to the kitchen table concerns, the economic security of every single person in our state, whether they lived on the Eastern Shore or East Baltimore, in Cumberland, Maryland, or in Cecil County. We were the party that was committed to having the back of the hardest working people in our state. And that's why we won after a recession with a 14-point margin over a Republican candidate that we had beaten once before and came back and raised just as much money. Sandra, I take to heart your admonition that we tell you how you can hold us accountable. I have rolled out a 100-day plan because in this election, this is a time not for a caretaker, not for a continuity leader, but for a change maker. We need to make changes if we're going to win the next elections. And this is my 100-day plan, and I want you to hold me to it. On day 1, I will reassert our commitment to be the party of economic security for all and health and well-being for every single hardworking family. I will name a transition chair, and I will announce the standing up of 2 new centers at the DNC headquarters. One is a Center for Digital Communications Excellence, and the second is called ActionStat, to drive the leading actions every 2 weeks that will drive up voter registration and candidate recruitment. 2, on day 2, I will announce the holding of county chair town halls all across America in every region of the country that we will hold and complete through the month of February, and I will be there in person and present. I will appoint on day 5 an after action commission to do a deep dive, dispassionate analysis of why we lost so that we can explain what we've learned so that we can restore trust to win the next election. I will appoint on day 10 a task force on open and transparent governance in the DNC so we can make the changes we must in order to restore trust in the operations of this party. On day 15, I will appoint a task force on the future of our party. That is, how we reconnect, re-engage, and lift up the young people of this party, the next generation that feels like we don't have any regard for their talents, their skills, or their insights. On day 40, we will begin our first rotation of 4 meetings at ActionStat with all of the players around the table. Democratic governors, their representatives from the Democratic mayors, lieutenant governors, secretaries of state, treasurer, all our affiliated committees. And that will focus on candidate recruitment, voter registration, fundraising, digital communications on a regular rotating every 2 week basis. On day 50, we will stand up that Center for Excellence for Digital Communications so we can communicate the Democratic message and our counterpunch to Donald Trump and the harm that he's about to do to working people, not just at election time, 30 days before, but every day in channels that people actually go on to, that they listen to, where they get their information from trusted and reliable people that we will recruit as influencers to fill up those channels. And on day 100, we will roll out our first draft of an action plan on the year. So hold me accountable. I'm running as one of the best turnaround leaders in our party today. I've proved it at every level. Mayor of Baltimore, Governor of Maryland, and most recently, at the president's request, turning around a customer service meltdown at the understaffed and depleted Social Security Administration. So I ask for your support. I appreciate you holding this forum, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Of course, we're going to come back to one of these key questions that we want to hear everyone's opinion on. corporate interests, lobbyists in the party, dark money. What's your plan to reduce that? And I'm going to even add something further. How are you going to try to build internal capability and not just relying on consultants in the party?
Yes, I believe that we need to have a lot more diversity and inclusion, not only geographically across our country, but also from people of different ethnic backgrounds, races in our consultant pool. In fact, that's why my very first paper was about inclusion and diversity in the vendors and the consultants to this party. There's a lot of anger, a lot of grief. Sandra, I feel like I've been doing grief counseling with every call I make to DNC members. And one of the constant refrains is nobody listened to us. And who are these consultants that were running ads that weren't working to persuade anybody? So I believe that we should not receive and should not accept dollars that come from entities, corporations that are opposed to our key policy or our principles, our values. It's companies that bust unions or engage in union busting. I think that's appropriate. I think that's right. I think that goes to the integrity of our party. But it is going to be very difficult to raise money without the White House. So we have to dial up our digital communications, and it can't be these nasty, these scare emails every other minute that say, I'm Barack Obama, and oh my God, I can't believe what's about to happen. You know, we need to treat people with a little more intelligence. We need to use that fundraising to communicate over the arc of time in ways that people actually care about. And we need to do a much better job of building up a customer relations management system, if you will, with grassroots donors so that we can communicate with them online about the issues they care about before we ask them again and again and again to send $5 because, oh my God, the sky's falling. We'll have plenty of opportunities. There'll be no lack of fear in the air, but we need to make sure we communicate with people over a narrative, and we need to dial up the grassroots donations in this opportunity. Darkness makes a great canvas, and Donald Trump's going to provide plenty of darkness for us to dial up the grassroots involvement of funding this party and candidates that we need to recruit all across the ballot, not down the ballot, but all across the ballot.
Okay, I have one more question for you, and it's internal again within the DNC. Do you support the current rule, which provides that the chair shall appoint up to 75 at-large members? Or do you support a bylaw change that would provide for the election of the at-large members, especially to allow the diversity caucuses to nominate at-large members to provide for proportional representation? One way or another, why or why not, please?
Yes, I do support the current rule, but I'm also aware that the reason that rule came into being was after 1988 and Jesse Jackson's second very exciting campaign. And the purpose of it was to give the chair the flexibility to better balance and make more inclusive the governing body of the DNC. So, to that end, I would welcome nominations from the caucuses. I would welcome nominations of people that want to be appointed to those at-large positions. And as I did as the mayor of Baltimore, as I did as the governor of Maryland, I will act in ways that are aligned with what I believe is the greatest strength of our nation and the greatest strength of our party, which is our diversity. That is our strength. As the great Frederick Douglass said, we are one, our cause is one, and we must help each other if we are to succeed, and the party needs to reflect the diversity of the United States.
Thank you so much, Martin. Now I'd like to introduce Jay Levine from Roots Action, my co-host, to proceed. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Sandra. Hi, this is Jay Levine. I'm with the State Democratic Party Progressive Network, just like Sandra. Whoops. And I'm here to introduce James Skoufis, candidate for DNC chair. James represents New York's 42nd district in the state Senate. On election day, he won re-election by over 13 points, running 23 points ahead of VP Harris, who lost the district by double digits. In 2012, he was elected to the New York State Assembly, becoming its youngest member at 25. James has won on Trump turf 3 times and says the key is to show up everywhere and spread a populist message. Welcome, James. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Jay. Hi, everybody. And thanks to Our Revolution and all the partner groups for hosting tonight's important forum. And first and foremost, I want to thank everyone who is here for the blood, sweat, and tears you've contributed to either our party or causes important to many in our party. I know that for many, the National Democratic Party has sometimes not lived up to your expectations. We have to do better, and we will do better. Now, I know I'm not a household name to many folks watching. I'm not a state party chair. I'm not a former governor. I'm not an operative. I am someone, as was just mentioned, who knows how to win in places like my Trump plus 12 district, where we as National Democrats have stopped winning. And I do so without sacrificing my democratic values. I know how to coalition build for a living and speak with voters, not to voters, and not in overly academic terms that make it seem like we're better suited sometimes for running for university chancellor than for public office. For the better part of 4 years, our national party pushed white paper talking points about how our GDP was doing better year over year than other countries, and so our economy was doing wonderfully, as if any voters care about data points like that when they're paying double at the supermarket for their food. We need to become relatable again as a Democratic Party, meaningfully engage and speak to the issues that are top of mind for voters, whether we like those issues or not, and decidedly take a side in the fight between the working class and corporate elites. I grew up in a union household, proud members of an American Postal Workers Union member and National Association of Letter Carriers member, and I viscerally believe in advancing working class priorities. For years, I've rejected corporate campaign contributions, while my opponents have stockpiled that cash in efforts to defeat me in my deep red district of over 300,000 people. Every single member of our party will hear a message from me as DNC chair. We are leaving our ivory towers for the factory floors, and we're going to start listening and responding to the needs of workers and everyday Americans again as a party. As Democrats, that's what we did for over a century, and that's what we'll do again when I'm elected DNC chair. Additionally, we need to stop fence sitting on and running away from the politically tough issues. Voters can see when we're obfuscating and dodging them. They're not stupid. And all we wind up doing is alienating every voter from every stakeholder group in the process. Take the conflict in Gaza. Our national party has walked on eggshells for over a year, afraid of saying the wrong word that might piss off this group or a different word that might piss off that group. We didn't bring empathy. We didn't meaningfully engage. The result? Everyone from college campus activists to Arab Americans to Orthodox Jews deeply lost trust in our national party. We alienated everyone. The next iteration of our national party cannot ride a fence from here to Sunday on the most important issues to voters. Now, it's not good enough to espouse values that we do not live ourselves. That's why I've advanced the most aggressive platform to reform the DNC of anyone running in this race. Right out of the gate 2 months ago, I made taking the fight to the DC consultant class central to my platform, going as far as demanding that every vendor contract be allowed to expire and be competitively rebid. Too much of our party's money is going to friends of a congressman or folks who otherwise have special relationships in the DNC. As chair, my message will be loud and clear to these grifters. If you want to earn our party's business, you're going to earn it honestly and by demonstrating value, not because of who you know at the DNC. This race for chair is not a battle of ideology like it was 8 years ago. This race is an inside-outside race, and our opportunity to do things differently so that our party can get back to winning. If you want a chair that's going to kick the consultant class to the curb and rebuild the ship from the hull up to the masts with you, someone who coalition builds for a living and has taken the fight to Donald Trump for the past 12 years on tough Trump terrain, someone who's committed to appointing an executive director from organized labor, someone who's going to empower every talented member of the DNC, not just a minuscule inner circle, and someone who's going to give the grassroots a clear, direct seat at the table, then I'm your guy, and together, let's get back to winning. Thank you again, and I'm looking forward to your questions, and after tonight, fighting for the heart and soul of our party with you.
Great. Thank you, James. All right. First question we have is the question we've been asking everybody. What do you plan to do to reduce the influence of corporate interests and lobbyists in the party?
As I said before, you don't have to just take my word that we will reject nefarious contributions and donors from folks who do not share our values. I've lived and breathed this. Not only have I myself, as I mentioned before, rejected corporate campaign contributions, despite running against opponents who have gladly welcomed them and have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in my race to try and defeat me. I've stood up to corporate welfare. That is one of the main core issues that I am known for in the state legislature, and I've even introduced legislation for those candidates who don't voluntarily reject that money to ban corporate contributions for folks who run for office in New York State. And so I will speak out against those nefarious contributions, and I will reject those nefarious contributions from folks who do not share our values in the party.
Great, thank you. Do you support the current rule which provides that the chair shall appoint up to 75 at-large members? Or do you support a bylaw change that will provide for the election of at-large members? Now, we heard before, right? This is all about diversity, and we're curious to see where you stand on all this.
I have the most aggressive response to this issue of anyone that's running. And as I said before, you can check out my platform, scoofusfordnc.com. There's a whole section that speaks to reforming and making transparent and making the DNC more responsive than it is right now. And I specifically speak to this issue as well, because if you pull up the list of the 75 at-large appointees that the DNC chair currently gets, it will not surprise you that a hugely disproportionate number of these appointees are lobbyists, consultants, huge donors, and the definition of insidery insiders. And what I have pledged, I'm the only one really talking about this in a real serious, leaning into this in a big way, is that none of that is going to continue happening. We are not going to be giving out DNC appointments to some random guy that worked 30 years ago in the Clinton White House because we think we owe some kind of favor to him. And by the way, guys like that are not meaningful contributors to the 448-member DNC. They just want the fancy title. And so I am going to use these 75 slots. And yes, we're going to solicit input. We're going to request nominations from the councils and the caucuses. But I am going to be interested in using these 75 slots to address the inequities that exist among the broader 448 larger, broader membership. And so what does that mean? Right now, for example, 18 to 35-year-olds, young Democrats, make up almost 20% of the Democratic Party. They make up, last time I checked, about 6% of the DNC membership. And there are inequities like that for a wide variety of backgrounds and demographics that need to be addressed using these 75 slots. No longer will they be used as a patronage mill when I'm DNC chair.
Thanks, James. Just a quick answer. Do you support a bylaw change?
I do not support a bylaw change. I think that opens up significant unintended repercussions. But what I'm talking about requires a DNC chair that's going to open up the organization and make sure that we get the grifters out of our party. And I believe we could do that without a bylaw change that I think has some other unintended repercussions.
Okay, thank you. And so this is about Citizens United and dark money. Do you support a DNC task force providing options for state parties to limit or eliminate dark money in their primaries?
Yes.
Great, thank you. And I'm just going to ask, you talked about Gaza and the Democratic Party, the DNC needs to get off the fence. Where are you on that? What side of the fence are you going to get off on?
Yeah, so I need to be clear because I've seen you ask policy questions to some of the other candidates as well. The DNC chair, it is not my obligation or interest, and it's not in any or should not be in any DNC chair's portfolio, to impose one's ideology or policy preferences onto the Democratic Party. You know, the DNC is meant to be an organization that coalition builds and wins elections. And so I'm not a lawmaker. I'm a lawmaker in my day job right now. The next DNC chair is not a lawmaker, a policy maker. And so my interest is going to be to go to all of those stakeholders, many of whom are on this call. And these are some of my first meetings as DNC chair, by the way, and go to them with some contrition and explain, look, we have not lived up to your expectations as a national Democratic Party, and we have to do better. And maybe we're not going to agree on every nuanced issue of every complicated policy portfolio.
James, we need you to wrap it up, okay?
But it begins by respecting your worldview and your position. And no longer is the National Democratic Party and the DNC and the DNC chair going to be dismissive.
I'm sorry. We have to move on.
Okay. Yeah. I think you get my point. Yeah.
Yes. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Alan Minsky, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Alan Minsky, executive. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's participating in this. Thank you for OR for setting up the infrastructure of the call. I'm Alan Minsky, Executive Director, Progressive Democrats of America. Of course, want to thank Roots Action. I want to thank Sandra and everybody with the State Democratic Party Progressive Network. Look, just as a thing to put into the chat, an article I published today on Common Dreams, which is simply called The Progressives Need to Take Over the Democratic Party. And it's something I'll refer to, if I have time, in a follow-up question to Ben Wickler, who I'm about to introduce. It's part of a 4-part series I will be publishing between now and this leadership election. For those of us at Progressive Democrats of America, this must be a turning point for the Democratic Party. It must be a turning point where the progressive base of the party's voices are stronger and are heard more soundly throughout the party and come to define the party going forward. I believe that the neoliberal center of the Democratic Party is ideologically exhausted. But alas, Ben Wickler, I am absolutely thrilled to introduce. And Ben Wickler is, of course, the head of the Wisconsin Democratic Party. And he's chaired the party through 5 years of intense elections, helping to flip Wisconsin from red to blue in 2020. As Ben knows from his appearance at Progressive Central this summer, the PDA hosted in Chicago in the weekend before the Democratic Convention. He's done an incredible job continuing the work of the great Nate Timm and the Wisconsin Grassroots Network in reaching out to all of rural Wisconsin as the head of the Democratic Party. And as the Washington, D.C. director at Move On, he helped lead the national campaign to defeat Trump's attack on the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid. And he is rumored to have been a writer in his youth for The Onion, but who would know, because nobody has bylines at The Onion. But alas, Ben Wickler, welcome, and your opening statement as a candidate to this progressive forum as a candidate for the DNC chair.
Thank you so much, Alan. Thank you so much to everyone here in this forum. I come to you from Wisconsin, a birthplace of the progressive movement, where in the 19th century, robber barons took over the economy, rigged our system to keep the power of people out, where workers fought, struck, were massacred in the fight for recognition of labor rights. And then the progressive movement in my state won. And it changed politics in the state and across the country. Wisconsin became the first state with a statewide apprenticeship law, the first state with clean government laws, the first state to ensure that working people could get unemployment and workers' compensation, the first state with an LGBTQ rights law, the first state with a disability rights law, the first state with bilingual education, the state that created Earth Day. And then the far right struck back. In 2010, Scott Walker and Republicans took over control of the state of Wisconsin and rigged the system to shut down the voices of working people and grassroots movements. They suppressed the votes, targeting young people and Black voters and Latino voters in particular. They changed our campaign finance laws to shut unions out and welcome ultra-wealthy individuals in. They gerrymandered our state beyond all recognition, and they smashed unions, knowing that divide and conquer tactics to be able to shut down the voices of working people would eliminate the voice of the many in favor of the voice of the few. And then they could defund public education, defund our university system, pass laws that most Wisconsinites abhorred. And they did this until we figured out a path through work of thousands of people marching, organizing, fighting, thinking through, strategizing across the grassroots in every corner of Wisconsin, how to build a movement mighty enough to fight back. I grew up in a Wisconsin that prided itself on that progressive tradition. I worked in progressive politics and activism and new media across the country. I did write for The Onion. I worked at Air America Radio. I worked for Sherrod Brown in 2006. I worked at Move On. And at Move On, I often was challenging Democrats and often not on the same page as significant parts of the party. But I moved home in 2018 and I ran for state party chair out of the recognition that if you believe that this country should work for working people across race and ethnicity and ideology, across rural areas and cities and suburbs alike, if you think that regular folks should have a shot and a voice, if you think that working people should have power, if you think that we should stand up for the poor and not just rig the system for the rich, if you think those things, you need a strong Democratic Party. And that's why I'm thrilled to join you tonight and to ask for your support, because in this moment, we have a chance to build a party strong enough to be able to resist the people who are trying to ransack this nation top to bottom, to divide us across our identities, to divide us by cutting us apart, in order to rip off everybody, no matter what our skin color is, no matter who we love, no matter how we pray or whether we pray. Now, there are a lot of candidates in this race, and a fellow candidate runs the Association of Democratic State Chairs. And I went to my first Association of Democratic State Chairs meeting and was struck that it's a meeting where the state chairs arrive and then they're pitched by companies, by vendors, by consultants that want their business and want to be paid by state parties to do things to help them in elections, and often very fine people. But what you don't get in those meetings is a coalition. You don't get union representation. You don't get people coming together to figure out how to tackle corporate power and the power of people trying to rig the system and to build inside-outside strategies to be able to actually win. It doesn't feel like the kind of party that I'm trying to build. And I'm running because, to me, we should have no commitments to any vendors, any consultants. We should be auditing every single one of the people that do business with Democratic politics to make sure they align with our values and with the path to victory. There's a lot of money that sloshes around in politics. And you know what? Republicans have built a system in which money is a powerful force in our politics. But if we're going to be raising money and spending money, it has to be in line with our values and actually winning elections so we can unrig this country for working people. So that's my commitment in this race. And I join you today knowing that this is going to be a big contest, knowing that the chairs race is wide open, knowing that there are 19 days. I want to ask for your support in the race so that we can build a party that's able to build a strategy in every state from the grassroots up, with unions, with our partners in the grassroots that can fight and win elections in every corner of this country. That's why I'm joining you today, and I'd be grateful to have your support.
Thank you so much, Ben. I'm going to flip these questions around because I'm going to expand on the question about corporate interest, lobbyists, and major big money in the party. So the first question is concerning this. Do you support the current rule which provides that the chair shall appoint up to 75 at-large members, or do you support a bylaw change that would provide for the election of at-large members, especially to allow the diversity caucus to nominate at-large members to provide for proportional representation? Why or why not? So the question about the 75 at-large members, Ben Wickler.
I hear where this question and the recommendation comes from. We cannot have a DNC that's just full of party insiders who are owed favors, who are scratching backs, who might have contracts or business with the DNC. And I will tell you, you can ask folks in Wisconsin, I go out of my way to ensure that appointees represent all the communities around our state and are not just people there to say yes to me. At the same time, I say no to the bylaw change. And the reason for that, one is, I'm sure you've heard this before, I've made commitments in this race to ensure that, for example, 20% of at-large appointees are young people, that we have at least 5, shoot for 10 people with known and visible disabilities on the DNC. I'm committed to Black and Latino and Native American and API and LGBTQ representation of ethnic, working class folks from across the country, of rural members of our coalition, of veterans, of seniors, of small business representation, and labor needs to be represented on the DNC. And that is not something where you can divide that into a whole bunch of categories and have elections within each of those caucuses and be able to hit all those goals at once and represent people from states across the country. So there is work to do to make sure we find folks that can lift up all these different communities at once. I've done this math in DNC delegation and at-large appointees. I've done this math as at-large appointees at the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, and we have built extraordinary coalitions of amazing people who've gone on to do extraordinary things in the party. But I do think that it is the right place for a chair who's elected by the full membership of the DNC to figure out how to do that in a way that represents the values and the coalition that brought them to bear as the leader of the party. So I don't support the rule change, but I support the spirit behind this proposed rule change. And I've lived that out, and you can see it in my appointees as chair.
Thank you so much. Now, again, I just threw my article into the link again. This particular is the first of a four-part article about this leadership race, and it focuses on the need to move the party back to FDR-esque economic policies. And in fact, we will, of course, draw in the working class, and the corporate donors will leave the party if we bank this, because we know corporate money wasn't flocking into Bernie Sanders. I do appreciate what people said earlier about drawing in small money donations. I do want to remind everybody here that Bernie Sanders did outraise every other candidate in the race last time in 2020, and he did it with small dollar donations and no money from billionaires, and that's a great model for a Democratic Party going forward. So as a way of framing this second question that we have for all candidates, how would you plan to reduce the influence of corporate interests, lobbyists, and big money influences in politics? And I'll have a follow-up for that as well.
I think the most important way we do this is by choosing the fights that we fight, and choosing those not based on who's making donations, but choosing those based on actually delivering change in the lives of working people and stopping the far-right ultra-wealthy from rigging this country to ensure that working people don't have a voice. If we fight those fights, we demonstrate who we are, we draw support towards us of people who agree with those values in a country that is majority working class, where the enormous diversity of the working class, of people of all skin colors, of all ethnic backgrounds, of all languages, of all faiths, they have in common that they need a paycheck that can support the lives that they want to lead and their families if they choose to have them, that they need a roof over their heads, they need medicine when they get sick and access to healthcare, they need food that they can actually afford to buy and to eat. And I will tell you, we had a moment where the federal government showed up for people across the country, where the incomes of those in the bottom half of the economic distribution went up. And then Republican votes and a couple of Democrats stopped that from becoming permanent. It killed support that for a brief moment cut poverty in this country in half. And that, combined with rising prices, to me, is the biggest explanation for how we lost ground in every single state in this country. So we need to fight those fights, be clear about who's on the other side of those fights, and not care if that means that donors walk away from the party, because I think we will build a bigger grassroots base, as we have in Wisconsin, where we've had 450,000 donors to our state party, average of $20 contributions. That is the way we define who we are and build trust with people that we're fighting on their side.
Okay, I have two more questions, and I do apologize if I go a minute over here, but I do think there was something that we have somewhat tiptoed around on this call, and so I do apologize in part to be so forthright in this direct question of Ben Wickler, but it really belongs to everybody. Let's be honest, everybody on the call, progressives got slaughtered. We got slaughtered by big money pouring into our primaries, in particular from one or two sources, and we know what they were. They were from AIPAC, United Democracy Fund, and from crypto funding. This level of money against progressive candidates was absolutely produced some very, very skewed and negative results for progressives. And Robert Borisaj actually asked in the chat a very pointed question about this a few minutes ago. Again, how do we prevent that going forward? Why not just ban outside big money donations in the party? Your thoughts on that, Ben Wickler?
We don't have the power to make laws. And
Right.
so we don't actually have the power to ban outside big money donations. And I say this coming from Wisconsin, where we watch massive outside money contributions pour in on the right. Mandela Barnes would be United States Senator today if two billionaires, Diane Hendricks and Dick and Liz Uihlein, their family, I guess, three billionaires, hadn't put $29 million into the biggest single candidate super PAC in the entire country in 2022. That led to a massive outspend, and he wound up losing by a single percentage point. A dynamite candidate, a candidate who shares the values of so many of us here, who fell short because Republicans poured that money in. Elon Musk has already pledged, he's already posted that he's going to intervene with super PAC spending in Democratic primaries to attack his enemies.
Right.
They are coming. And we don't have the power to change laws right now. What we have the power to do is to build up our strength to be able to fight back. And that, to me, is the core of what we need to be able to do as a party.
And let's be honest, George Latimer, was that his name, the guy who defeated Bowman? He's not going to be Musk's enemy. We know who Musk's enemies are going to be. They're going to be our progressive base that we have supported from the organizations here. Final question. The second part of the article in the four-part series is going to be about Democratic Party entrism from progressivism. From our point of view, the moderates are defeated. They are weakened. They need an influx of progressive ideas. The party has not felt welcoming to progressive rank and file members who want to enter the party. When you are the chair, and again, I apologize, this question I would love to pose to everyone, and I'll be in touch with every candidate on this call to ask this question of you directly. Will you make sure that the party is open to rank and file entryism into the party and participation with the party? Because that hasn't been how progressives have felt welcomed by the party in recent years.
We got to open the doors. And this is where, I mean, John Stanley, the leader of the Progressive Caucus in Wisconsin, I'm so grateful to have a great relationship with. It is one of our biggest caucuses at our party, alongside the Rural Caucus and the Women's Caucus in the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, making sure that folks know that they have a home, that we are a big tent that is not trying to expel the left flank of the Democratic Party. And there are moderates in the Democratic Party as well. We can disagree with each other about different things. What we can't do is create an environment where we're purging our own party and shutting out the folks who are actually ready to do the work to fight these battles. And I will say something striking about this moment. I've been speaking to folks across the Democratic spectrum ideologically. There is a shared sense right now, and a shared understanding that it is working people across race and gender and across different geographies. It is working people that we are losing with. We are losing touch with them because they don't trust that the Democratic Party is on their side. And you're hearing this from folks that are avowedly, explicitly moderate, that prioritizing kitchen table issues that people directly see and fighting against those who are trying to rig the economy. This is something that it just screams from the data. This is how we lost the last election. And if we keep doing that, we're going to lose future elections. And if all you care about is general elections, then you have to come back to this core point. And it's not at the expense of work on social justice, on racial justice. It's actually the bedrock. Economic solidarity is the bedrock for all other forms of progress, because everyone has in common the fundamental human needs that we have. And when we build a basis of solidarity and trust around those common needs, that opens the door to work in solidarity across the other movements that make up the Democratic Party. So this is a moment of opportunity, I believe, for building that core base, that core commitment that shoots through every part of our party. And if I'm the DNC chair, this is in my platform at benwickler.com/platform. This is what we've done in Wisconsin. This is why, even as Democratic turnout fell next door in Minnesota, Democratic turnout rose in Wisconsin this year. When we lost state legislative seats in Minnesota, we flipped 14 state legislative seats in Wisconsin because we'd unrigged our maps, and then we fought the fight on the ground. This is the moment to do this work. And I'd be grateful for everyone's support in the race for DNC chair as we seek to do it.
Thank you so much, Ben Wickler. And I now hand off the baton to Sam Rosenthal with Roots Action to introduce Marianne Williamson. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everybody, again.
Hi again, everyone. Thanks, Alan. It's now my pleasure to introduce Marianne Williamson, also candidate for DNC chair. Marianne's an author, speaker, political activist, and she's a lifelong Democrat and two-time presidential candidate who ran on transformative policies like Medicare for All and ending student and medical debt. She's also founded organizations like Peace Alliance, Center for Living, and Project Angel Food, and served to feed and house those suffering in the AIDS crisis. Welcome, Marianne.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate being here. I know a lot of people who have just kind of had it with the Democratic Party, a lot of progressives who say, I'm done, I'm going third party, going to try to build a third party, others who just sort of sworn what they call electoralism. I don't think we can afford to do any of that right now. At least I can't, because I believe that we cannot afford for the Democratic Party to fail. At the same time, we have to beware and be very clear about what's going on here. We have in front of us a neo-fascist assault. And I'm reminded of words by FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, when he said, we will not have to worry about a fascist takeover as long as democracy delivers on its promises. I think the Democrats created a great big hole, and Donald Trump just walked into it. And if it hadn't been Donald Trump, it would have been someone else. Anyone with even a rudimentary knowledge of history knows that when you have large groups of desperate people, all manner of personal and societal dysfunction emerges from that, including attraction to a political strongman and genuinely psychotic forces. So here we are. And the Democratic Party, I think, needs to take a very good look in the mirror in many of the ways we've talked about here tonight, but at a deep enough level to admit to ourselves and to have a sense of contrition to the nation, just how we messed up. You know, Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg said that the men who had died there had given that last full measure of devotion, he called their deaths, so that a government of the people and by the people and for the people would not perish from the earth. And I think it's perishing now. I think that's what progressives recognize, because we are now a government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. We've always known this about the Republican Party. That's their sort of market philosophy, that if you allow corporate short-term profits to be your governing principle, then it'll be better for everybody. Of course, we know it's not better for everybody. It's better for a tiny few. But ever since the 1970s, it was in the late 70s that the DNC started taking corporate money. All of our moral authority just kind of started to leak out of everything, because in the last 50 years, we've had that $50 trillion transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% of the American people. And this is the truth. The Republicans started it, and no Democrat has stopped it. In the 1970s, we had the average American couple could afford a house, could afford a car, could afford a yearly vacation, could afford for one parent to stay home if they wanted to, and they could afford to send their kids to college. Because before then, you had free and near free tuition college situations, California, University of Texas, University of Florida. The Republicans have a story and they're sticking to it. We don't tell our story. They have a cohesive worldview. We find it abhorrent, but they tell it all the time, and we need to have ours. And that is that we are here for one purpose. We have the values of Rooseveltian democracy. The belief of the Democratic Party is that the purpose of public policy is to help people thrive. Franklin Roosevelt would talk about the freedoms of and the freedoms from. He said, yes, the freedom of speech is important, the freedom of religion, the freedom of assembly, but also the freedoms from. We must be dedicated to freedom from want and freedom from fear. We must show on every single day, in every single way, that we are here to advocate for the working people of the United States. Now, this is the deal. When I was growing up, you knew that. You just knew it. It was in the air that the Democratic Party was for the people. And the way the Republican Party, once again, we know what they're about. The Democrats is how we come across, and this is how we come across because this is what we are. We really want to help people, we really do want to help people, but we're not willing to go so far as to cross the line past which we would be offending our own corporate donors. And the hypocrisy smells, and people resent us for it. The truth is there's a matrix of corporate power, which at this point is corporate tyranny in this country. Insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, big food companies, big chemical companies, big agricultural companies, gun manufacturers, big oil, and defense contractors. And their short-term profit maximization, those goals have actually replaced democracy. Instead of our bottom line being the safety, the health, and the well-being of the American people, it is short-term profit maximization for these huge corporate entities. It is economic values and soulless economic values. We shouldn't come across like we're not for righteous commerce. High side of the free market, fine. But even Adam Smith, the main architect of that, said it cannot exist outside an ethical center. There's nothing ethical. Not only is there nothing ethical, it is amoral. It is even sociopathic. When you put the profits for an insurance company or a pharmaceutical company or a gun manufacturer or a big food company or big chemical, any of those, before the right of a child to be able to breathe, before people's right to have health care. We have 1.3 million people in this country who ration their insulin. We are the only advanced country in the world that does not have universal health care. We have people in this country putting up GoFundMe pages. You don't have this in any other country, in advanced country, where people are putting up GoFundMe pages to pay for life-saving operations. We have people, when you go through poorer neighborhoods in the United States today, and apparently way too many of our lawmakers, including Democrats, haven't been through these neighborhoods. Let me tell you what you see. More and more. I used to see, every once in a while, you see them a lot now, blood plasma centers. Do you know what that means? Do you know why they're popping up in poor neighborhoods? People are selling their blood plasma. When you have 70, excuse me?
Just cutting in, I just want to make sure that we still have time to do questions. So,
oh, sure. I'm sorry. I didn't realize I'd hit the 6 minutes.
No,
Anyway,
no.
These are the things that the Democrats should stand for. And if I may just finish, we should make it clear. There's one candidate here. It's all fight, fight, fight. As the head of the DNC, I think people are tired of fighting. We will not win by fighting. We've already lost the fight. We will win by inspiring. We will win by showing people what America could be and reverse engineering from there. 5 years from now, every American will have health care. 5 years from now, that every American will have a roof over their head. That 5 years from now, every American will be able to have a higher education, and within 5 years, serious climate change mitigation. We will change from a war economy to a peace economy. We will change from a dirty economy to a clean economy. We will inspire this country to what we can be. And every single day, we need to tell people what the Democrats are doing towards that in the House, in the Senate, and in their state legislators and legislatures, and how they can be involved. That's how we're going to put this party back together. And what's important about that is how it's going to put the country back together. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Marianne Williamson. I want to ask you the questions we've been giving everyone else a chance to answer. First, as you've heard, lots of folks in the chat concerned about the influence that corporate interests and lobbyists have in the party. What is your plan to reduce and curb that influence?
It's worse than you have any idea. So you have a small group of people. You have mainly these four consultant groups, right? The SKDK Knickerbocker and Precision Strategies and GMMB and Waterfront Strategies. And they're even, you talk about these at large. Some of them, these people actually have consulting contracts, some of them. This has got to be cleaned out. We talk about the kind of country we don't want to be an oligarchy. The DNC is an oligarchy. So, and it's an oligarchy of thought, not just of money. So we have to just completely stop all that. And anybody who has a contract with any vendor, consultant or otherwise, should not be one of the members of the DNC at large or any other. And those consultants, that whole thing had to be broken up. One of the other candidates says we're going to put it into free competition. I say get it out of Washington. Get it out of Washington. If you're going to hire a consultancy firm to work in North Dakota, it should be a company in North Dakota and so forth. Feed these local economies. We got to break this thing up. It's a bunch of elite. You know what? Is the truth about the DNC? This is really sad. Are you ready? It's what people think it is. Too many times the worst things you hear about the Democratic Party. Yeah, it is how we operate. And if I'm the chair of the DNC, that's going to change. That's going to change.
Great, thank you. And then next question, would you support the bylaw change we've been discussing that would provide for the election of at-large members?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You can't, yeah, of course. We have to. Mm-hmm.
Great. And then one final question, this one from folks who are on the call. What do you think is the single most important change the DNC can make as it looks specifically to combat Trump and the Trump era?
We have to have a cohesive story. What's been happening over the last few years is that the DNC has been completely focused on the presidential race. It hasn't even been, this is the main governing body of the Democratic Party. It hasn't even been dealing with local races. It hasn't been dealing with counties. It hasn't been dealing with states. We have to have a cohesive story, and we have to tell it every day. As I said before, the Democrats have a cohesive worldview, and they're telling their story every day. We need to tell our story every day. Today, storytellers are as important as technicians. We're going to tell a story about a country in which we take it very seriously that all men are created equal. And that doesn't just mean all Americans. We take it very seriously that the purpose of governments are instituted to secure the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And this communication system has to be telling that story every day. I want every day Americans to know this is what Democrats did in the House. This is what Democrats did in the Senate. This is what Democrats did in your state legislators today. By the way, this is how Trump screwed you today. You might not know that. We want you to know, and I want you to know how it's applicable to your everyday life, and I want you to know how you could participate in making it different 2 years from now, but even tomorrow, if you wish to join us, because we're here with you. We're not up here and you're down there, and that has to begin with how we run the DNC.
Thank you so much, Marianne Williamson. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And I'm going to pass it back to Alan Minsky. And Alan, I think you might be muted.
Thank you so much, Sam, and thank you, Marianne Williamson. And I do have to say, as sort of a addendum to what I said earlier about the welcoming of progressives into the party, I think it will be very telling. Whoever is lucky enough to win, as it were, to be the head of the next chair of the party, I certainly hope that everybody participating in this forum will have access to and having their voice heard within the Democratic Party. And again, to reiterate, this has not been the way that progressives have felt about Democratic leadership. And I know that that is, in many people's mind, very much an understatement that I'm making. And with that, I am happy to introduce our next candidate for DNC chair, and that is Jason Paul. And Jason Paul is an attorney and political strategist now residing in Newtown, Massachusetts. He is the author of Trench Warfare Politics in the Tinder Era, a book that explores the current and political landscape and presents ideas for reform within the Democratic Party. So Jason has written about this very subject. He lives and works in Newton, Massachusetts, where he continues to advocate for progressive change and a reimagined Democratic Party. Welcome, Jason Paul, and your opening statement to the audience here as to why you should be the next chair of the DNC.
So thank you all very much for having me. I am Jason Paul. I'm a reformer with the boldest plans in this race. We're going to stop the damn texts, which I'm sure have annoyed the crap out of all of us. We're going to have a subscription model to fund the party. I have high school and college plans that really go around with what we actually need. And I want to hire 10,000 permanent local organizers, one for every county and then one for every 50,000 of population. Beyond that, plans are at paulfordnc.com. But sort of what I bring to this race is a progressive. I ran for state rep against a sitting Democrat because she was aligned with the NRA and against gun control laws after the school shooting in Sandy Hook, and because she weakened Connecticut's crown jewel public financing system. Jim Dean's DFA endorsed me in that race, but most of the party wanted to go along and get along, despite being incredibly clear on running against guns and then having it both ways. So I've confronted the status quo even when it wasn't popular, and I will always go against the grain for what I think is right. We won't always agree, but I will always be open and honest with you all and make the playing field in our party the best it can be, so the best candidates and best ideas win. And with that, I want to take your questions, and we'll stay in the chat to answer more after that.
Oh, thank you. And again, maybe people on the rest of the team here can assist me in pulling questions from the chat, because Jason was gracious in having the shortest introductory comment. But the two follow-up questions pro forma, which I'm sure you're familiar with by now, are how do you plan to reduce the influence of corporate interests and lobbyists and big money donors in the party? That's the first two.
What I really want to do, and I know this is really both radical and not so radical, is I think we need publicly financed elections, even if we can't get the government money. I know the ultimate goal is to get the government money so that we have publicly financed elections that work for all of us and don't have to spend as much time raising money. But to me, there are now 15 million saved credit cards on ActBlue. There are another 5 million people who participate in this party who aren't donors yet. Maybe they can't be financially, maybe they can't be because they don't want to be. But in that 20 million people exists the money to fund everything that we want to do, like, as if it was Netflix. And I will say that sort of what they're not worried about losing one group of subscribers or a group of subscribers, because people want their product. People want to see the streaming shows they have. So they have something that people want. Our party also needs to have something that people want. And if we spend all the money on $1 billion of television ads in 7 states, no one is going to want to fund that. And I completely get that. And so then you have to go to the rich people who might think that if they give the big donations, then they will have influence with the next government. But if you're doing stuff like 10,000 organizers, like actually reaching out to college and high school kids, building up a party whereby, my ultimate goal is 1 million people getting $100 a month to talk to their neighbors. Because if we do that, then people will want to fund the party. And if we make it so that people want to fund the party, and by the party, I don't just mean the DNC, I mean the entire ecosystem. If we can get people so they want to fund the entire ecosystem because we're doing stuff that people like, then we won't be reliant on those big donors anymore. And then, we'll probably still get some, but it won't be a fear-based need. And right now it's a fear-based need. And if it's a fear-based need, you can't get rid of it.
Thank you. And what about the question again about the 75 at-large members of the DNC that the chair gets to appoint? Do you support a bylaws change that would provide for the election of the at-large members, especially to allow the diversity caucuses to nominate at-large members to provide for proportional representation? Your thoughts on that question? So
I put out a plan that I wanted to go cut the number from 75 to 50. And then I want to replace them. We currently have 16 affiliate organizations. I want to grow to 30 affiliate organizations. I want to bring people into the party sort of that, one of the major groups of those 75, a lot of them are important labor union leaders. I want to let them get 10 by right. And then sort of when you come to the sort of the caucus level, I think it's a nice idea that if we get people from each of the individual affinity caucuses, they'll successfully be able to elect people that give them representation. But a lot of times those organizations are not really currently, sort of, if you went to, and if you went to a rural American and said, who are your representatives on the rural caucus? 0.0007% could know who those people are. So I don't know if the current representatives are as representative to then replace that. I think giving the chair the ability to influence what would be 10% of the membership in my newly constituted DNC at 500, going from 448 to 500. I think that makes sense. And I think you do then need to go out and say, okay, who's the most reflective, who really wants to be there, and who it's like, oh, well, I want to be there, but I want to be there for other reasons, and maybe I don't super want to be there. But I will say the sort of just like a broad-based attack on all of them, when a lot of them are people who have given large portions of their like heart and sweat into the party, is just like a nasty way to go about it. So I think I'm kind of a moderate on this issue. It may not be exactly what you all want, but I definitely was in a position where I thought about this clearly. I think there could definitely be an affiliate organization for progressives. I think it's a little more complicated because if you're trying to push the party in a direction, then giving you, and you wouldn't want us to give the Blue Dogs a seat. So maybe you don't want us to give you a seat, or maybe you would, in which case we would have to talk about that. But sort of that is more my philosophy for these issues.
I should say, and I'm sure that as I'm about to toss over to Joseph again, and we move on to the other chairs, the other races, the vice chairs, et cetera, that there are, of course, a couple other candidates, and my understanding is that they did not respond to our outreach for them to participate. People have asked in the chat about some other candidates. And quickly, finally, just Jason, a final 30 seconds, if you can. I noticed you did outline as a progressive voice for change, and what got you involved in the idea of focusing on Democratic Party reform and progressive idea, and you have 30 seconds.
Well, so it's sort of been my whole life of doing democratic politics. I think politics can make people's lives better. I wonder if I can briefly answer the question about outside money in Democratic primaries.
Please.
I actually don't think we have to throw up our hands as much as people say, because in 2012, Scott Brown and Elizabeth Warren said, we're not going to have outside money in this race. And if you spend outside money in this race, we're going to have to give some portion of our money out of the race. It became strategically not wise to spend that outside money, and they kept outside money out. So it is possible. I will be honest, I don't think that it solves as many of your problems that happen in those two primaries as you guys might think, but it's definitely something that I think we should consider seriously, because even even if it's not what happened, the perception of it is terrible. So the perception just by those races, I think, is wrong.
Thank you. And you, of course, made reference to the two incumbents who lost, but it was so many more than the two incumbents. But thank you so much, Jason Paul. Really appreciate it. And over to you, Joseph.
Thanks, Alan Minsky, and thanks to all of our DNC chair candidates for participating. Want to now bring up candidates for vice chair. Again, this election is not just about who's at the top of the Democratic Party, but it's also for vice chairs of the Democratic Party who will round out the leadership team. And with that, I want to introduce several of the candidates who are running. James Zogby, he is a founding member of Our Revolution. He was an active member in the Bernie 2016-2020 election. He is a noted voice on just foreign policy. He served as the co-founder of the Arab American Institute and He served within the DNC for over 3 decades fighting for change. We're then going to hear from Shasti Conrad. Shasti is the head of the Democratic Party in Washington State. She is also a former Bernie Sanders presidential campaign staffer, both in 2016 and 2020. She is a longtime progressive organizer. We're going to also hear from Jane Klebb. She's chair of the Democratic Party of Nebraska. She's a founding board member of Our Revolution. She's been on the front lines of fighting for climate justice in the United States, as well as reforming the Democratic Party. So first up, James, then we'll kick it to Shasti and Jane, and then there may be a couple of other folks who join as well.
Thank you, Joseph, and thanks to all of you for listening in, especially for those of you who've been with this from the beginning and will stay until the end. It's an endurance contest, and I appreciate the fact that you're demonstrating endurance. I want to say first off, Michelle Dietrich, who's also running for vice chair, is not with us tonight. There's an emergency in her family in the hospital, and she's with them. And she's a wonderful woman leader of the Climate Council, and she's on my slate. I'm going to vote for her because I respect the work she does. Look, I've been on the DNC for, as Joseph said, 30 years. I was actually going to give it up this year, but the election got me so upset. I said one last shot at pushing for the reforms that I've been fighting for. Let me tell you how I got on the DNC. I got on with Jesse Jackson in 1988. People in the party leadership came to me and said, you ought to drop off because the Dukakis people are afraid Republicans are going to come after us because we got an Arab on the DNC. And a lot of people pushed me on that. And I finally said, okay, because Ron Brown, who was coming in as chair, said, I will make it up to you. I promise you don't want this to happen to you right now. Talked to my wife, talked to Jesse, and I decided to do it. When Ron Brown appointed me to the DNC after that, I decided I'm going to stick this out because I owe it to my community to fight that Arab Americans have a role, can play a role, and can actually become leaders in this party. Till this day, I'm the only Arab American in a leadership role in the party. I'm not giving it up. And here are the issues that we've had to fight for. I was on the Unity and Reform Commission. I was on the Executive Committee. I was on platform drafting. And issues that we raised were fundamental, and some of the ones that you've adopted for Our Revolution and this whole progressive coalition. We need accountability and transparency. The bylaws said we should review the budget annually. 32 years, never saw the budget. Had a resolution before the Reform Unity and Reform Commission to actually have an election that would drop, delete it, consider it for a vote. When I 0.8 spent in, never going to where TV had pockets of, they never money. And what happened? They walk away and they come for the next. It's a system got state not into there's can do, but work working them, which is to our. Why do you pay? That's the stuff volunteers do. That's the things captains to do, which is what I want to do. We have the central post vacant. Two of the pre-positions in the vacant. That's where people like who ethnic, who's talking, who's Ethiopians, who's talking Nicaraguans, new kids coming here, the party with them, expecting the value share. 30, see, who are in the meeting are nothing more than props who feel to wrap already clap, sit down, Catholic, Joseph, you understand, to church and a question. Ask a question. When he's in trouble. That has to change. We have some of the people there never talk to. Decisions are made. We rat and we talk. Have to be strong. To give more money to parties. Have to have a state party because some are in trouble, bankrupt, and not money bankrupt. In terms of a leader never goes away and never anybody paid to be accountability and transparency for state parties. Need the funds to be able to grow. And finally, I've raised, and I know you've raised dark money. We cannot Republican create funds to defeat progressive and let Senate Resolutions Committee. And you know what? They wouldn't allow a second. We could a second. And I went to people and why don't we serve 12 years? I knew folks. I said, vote for it. They were at me. It was like I was kind of Trotsky. It's like they don't want to be seen talking to me. I mean, the fact is that we allow assist a party. I don't have a. We have as a suspend and for it. Now, groups, outside groups, spend money to defeat a candidate. That is unacceptable. Reform, progressive running. People say, even happen. I think you can elect and progressive. We'll make it. We'll change because the change. For in here, my website, Jim's 4R. Look it up. Platform. Article that I wrote months ago. I'm running. I'm so the chance to speak to you. Great to be revolution again. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you for listening in.
Jim,
DNC member. I hope I learn it.
thanks for fighting the good for as long as you're doing it. Also, something that you mentioned on Southern this weekend. This is the second third election. You've been a
would come to me on the how does it work? And I don't know. We had one before was 2007 by Keith the Bernie. We'd had the Democratic Party at that meeting fight for money. First resolution we debated on the floor in all the years I've been on DNC. This is shaken. It's a Democratic shaken up, and a lot of folks right now are and I'm actually that we have this right now. We do it.
I think that really encapsulates what's wrong with the party, the Democratic Party, Democratic. We're all getting change. With bring up our next for DNC Vice Chair Con.
For having hi everybody. It's late on the East Coast, and it's West Coast. Everything there. Enjoyed and speak in front of you. As I was 2016 campaign and the 2020 campaign, met in 2016 on the. I traveled to 20 states. I was for a crowd and organized volunteers campaign. I was around the beginning of our revolution and very well that there was 26 campaign, and then as surrogate director for Bernie, rock concert for and campaign. I then decided to get involved. My local Democratic Party, in large part, was answering the call, asked us after 6 get involved in the democracy and from the inside, and decided to run, be a delegate, to be part of changing my local party, county party, where I was colored county Democrat. I am now, for the last, been the chair of Washington State. I am the first woman of color, youngest chair we've ever had. First South Asian woman party country, either party, and the first Asian chair in the lower 40 to be. And you know, views are always for bring and so important. To we are changing this inside. In Washington State, we went east, and in statewide, we actually a little bit more. We all statewide, all of our congressional incumbents, majority for the fifth cycle, and will be on the precipice of parties into our Constitution. There's a lot of incredible work that we're doing in Washington State that I do want to bring to the national party. A lot of that work is very close with our union we've done. We answered the economic Washington, we have paid family leave. We have into universal here, and so really good work that I can do the national party in this change. Talk about the importance of the movement. Things 2028 and White House, and that means the chair and the moment opportunity to change into leadership, to get into these leadership roles, to get people who record for working families. This is that. So I am opportunity alongside many of I do of your founder Cohen and support also the amazing and worked with form committee for making those. So I definitely leave for questions. I just want to again thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for sure. I know that standing Jane with Larry with brothers Zogby for fighting the good fight inside the party, and we're in terms of getting elected to the next vice chair. I want to bring Jane again board our solution. She's still on board, and she's been fighting as the head of the Nebraska Democratic Party, and I want to add she's also bold and fierce, hype, and that's in the to
thank you, and thank you, our revolution grassroots activists. Normally I'm in my office, but the internet was going a little on and off, so I can't in a not and I did want to bring down my attorney, a revolution activist. Well, it's 3D because normally right over there, he's always looking for me. A couple things. I'm running for DC position, Association of Democratic Committees. Chairs and vice chairs of the state parties for that position. The DNC offices you just heard from, like Jim and Shotzi, will bring those positions February 1st. The full DNC, 48 members vote on that position on February 1st. And then the ASDC elections happen on February 2nd. So that's about 114 voters. I basically would be the head of all the chairs and vice chairs. One of my main responsibilities would be negotiating the contract between the ASDC and the DNC Fortunately, I have some experience in that. Ken Martin has brought, you heard from Ken earlier. I'm endorsing and have endorsed Ken. I support Ken. Ken brought me along as his kind of co-pilot in the 2 past negotiations with the DNC. And we brought state parties from $2,500 a month. That's where we were, by the way, folks. State parties were only getting $2,500 a month from the DNC in 2000. When was I elected? 2016. We brought that to 7,500 under Tom Perez. It's now at 12,500 for blue and purple states, 17,500 for red states. That was not easy to get to. And by the way, that's not even what it should be. Right now, we're basically 10% DNC. That's the amount of money that goes to the state. The DNC is able to raise massive amounts of because the party structure that we eventually with the FEC, the way that we do our funding agreement. So we know the leverage we have as state parties. Ken Martin's been able to move that needle forward, and we're going to continue to move that forward. I do find it offensive when I heard Ben Wickler and I've heard other people on social media bashing the DNC and bashing the ASDC in particular. We really work hard at those ASDC meetings. I know the DNC meetings, I agree with Dr. Zogby, we really are used as props in those meetings, and there's not enough training and collaboration at the DNC meetings. But at the ASDC meetings, I don't know where Ben's been, but we have trainings, we have best practices, we meet as red states, blue states, purple states, we meet as regions. We have a really shared destiny that we have to build at the grassroots level. I share my block captain program, our voter guides. So I think in this moment, we have an opportunity to reset. I think the worst thing that we can do is start attacking and tearing down each other. We have progressives, we have moderates, we even have conservatives in our party. You know, I think it was, I don't even know who it was. Maybe it was Larry that told me, or maybe it was Jim Hightower, that in our party, we have 2 wings and you need both wings to fly. And that's where I am at this moment. I'm a proud progressive. And I want to remain and make sure that progressives aren't pushed to the side as we often are. We're often told that we have to shut up in order to make the party stronger. We have to claim our space, and we can do that with people like Zogby, Shasti, and Ken. Oh, there's Hades. But we also have to make sure that we're going to continue to fight for state parties and make sure that we're getting funding to the grassroots. That is the only way that we're going to rebuild our party. So thank you, Our Revolution, for never giving up. And I see Sandra on the screen, never giving up on local county parties and state parties, because that's where the change happens.
Jane, thanks for joining us at this late hour. We're with you in the fight. And I just want to highlight one thing again for our audience, $2,500 for state parties. That is a joke. That is obscene, given the amount of money that passes through the hands of the DNC treasurers and you name it. And that's exactly what we have to stop. The money's got to be invested in people closest to the ground. That is the obvious way for us to win and take back power. So with that said, again, we've had a long evening, lots of speakers. I want to bring up Alan Minsky with Progressive Democrats of America. Give us a few brief closing remarks. Alan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joseph. Thank you to the folks at Our Revolution for providing the infrastructure for this great event. Really, yeah, long event, a lot of great contributions, and obviously thank you to the people who are running for vice chair as well as running for chair. And I actually just wanted to end with reading I asked 2 of our young leaders actually to provide some thoughts. And so one person who both Our Revolution and PDA works with is William Walter, who is the chair, I believe, of Our Wisconsin Revolution, and he does work with the Young Progressive Democrats of America. And he sent me this statement. It's a short statement. This election the election for chair represents an inflection point for the Democratic Party. We will reaffirm our commitment to the working class, the engines of economic productivity, to uplift all Americans, or will we continue deferring to the donor class and the corporations? For progressives, young Americans in particular, the path we choose will dictate our future. We want to be Democrats, and that's with a big D, but Democrats must want us. We want to vote blue, but blue must reciprocate. Inspiration drives engagement, authenticity spurs energy, but support cannot be expected, it must be earned. It cannot be manufactured, it must be cultivated. The soil is fertile, people power, progressive policies shine a light on what we must advance. That is the new chair's job, is to water this movement so it may grow. This moment reflects the severity of our circumstances, and the elected chair must recognize the bold steps necessary. And then finally, I would also like to share a statement that was submitted for me to read by Hartzell Gray. And Hartzell Gray is the chair of Young Progressive Democrats of America. It's about equal length. Hello, my name is Hartzell Gray, and I chair the steering committee for Young Progressive Democrats of America. With this election for DNC chair, we have a chance to not just remake, but to completely transform the Democratic Party for the 21st century. An inclusive Democratic Party that takes the voices of all its people into consideration, including those of young people who are, by the way, members of the working class and our progressive movement. The people are ready for a New Deal-like material agenda. Simply put, the Democratic Party has a disingenuous problem. At best, they do not practice on the things we preach. A good portion of young people don't believe the Democratic Party means what they say at all. Young folks understand that money has no place in politics. Young people see that the system is rigged for moneyed interests and vulture capitalists. We all agree that the Supreme Court Citizens United ruling is an assault on our democracy. This cycle saw some of our fiercest progressive champions ousted by dark money interests like APEC, often with MAGA money. Can you commit, the next chair of the Democratic Party, to calling for advocating to ban PAC money from Democratic primaries? And that is from Hartzell Gray. He's actually the lead national coordinator of Young Progressive Democrats of America and the chair of our steering committee. So I just wanted to end with those two quotes. Joseph, thank you so much for organizing this. And I really believe that Progressive Democrats of America, we were involved in a poll that was done on our 21st Century Economic Bill of Rights. When you look at the support the Democratic Party voters have for the progressive measures that make up the principles of our revolution, Roots Action, the State Democratic Party Progressive Network, and PDA, over and over again among registered Democrats, every one of the measures in the 21st Century Economic Bill of Rights had over 80, often 90% support. That's like Medicare for all. What political party in the world doesn't have a platform that reflects that? That's what we need. We need a chair to drive it there. All of the transform the party points that our revolution puts forward, we must all embrace, folks. Thank you so much, Joseph. Thank you, ROR. Thank you, Roots Action. Thank you, State Democratic Party Progressive Networks. Thank you for everybody who joined us running for chair and for the vice chair positions. And let's push the voters who are voting here to do the right thing, folks. Let's make our case as strong as we can. As I mentioned, I'll have 4 articles out in the press. We're going to be sending them to as many of the DNC voters as we can reach. We got to get these 447 voters to vote the right way, the progressive way, transform the party, and then let's make the America that is as good as it's promised. Thank you, Joseph.
Thanks, Alan. And for all of you who have remained to the end, thank you for being a part of this forum. I want to quickly just run down a couple of activities and ways to get engaged. Look, we, in 1 week, as I said at the top of the call, Donald Trump and the oligarchs are going to assume power. We've got to be ready to fight back, not just with a revitalized Democratic Party, but also fighting in Washington, D.C. and around the country. So the first thing I want to encourage all of you to do is to support our reform agenda, the 4 points that we talked about. Link is in the chat. Second thing is, if you are in Detroit, Michigan, this Thursday, join One Fair Wage in our revolution. We're going to be outside the next candidate forum, speaking about issues that impact working class Americans and making sure that every single candidate addresses these issues. So if you are in Detroit, sign up and join One Fair Wage in our revolution at the DNC Candidates Forum. After that, on January 30th, 2 weeks from Thursday. Our Revolution and our allies are also going to be at the candidate forum in Washington, D.C. So if you live in Washington, D.C., in Maryland, Virginia, sign up to join us. We need to make sure that every single candidate hears what we're standing for and what we're fighting for. On January 27th, we're going to be hosting a progressive candidate briefing and training. If you are an elected official or are thinking about running in 2025, and I want to remind everyone, everything that happens in the United States is not just happening at the federal level. There are going to be elections all across the United States for school board members, city councilors, county commissioners, state legislators. And the way we're going to take back this country is by electing strong progressives from the bottom up. That's how Bernie started, and that's how we're going to take back this country. So on January 27th, if you are an announced candidate, elected official who's going to run again or otherwise engaged, join us for this special meeting. Again, candidates only. And then finally, on February 10th, we will be having our next Organize to Win call. We're going to be talking about Trump's agenda, which he will, we're expecting about 100 executive orders in 1 week, and it's going to be crazy. We're working with our client allies and other progressive allies around the about that on February 10th. In the sign up to join us. And last but not least, be a part of our rapid response team. We have to be ready in Washington and around the country for what's about to be coming at us. If you are willing to get out in your community and engage your neighbors to fight back, join our rapid response team. Link is in the chat. And with that, this is the end of our call. And I want to make sure we end our first call of this year with what we're going to do, which is our chant. When we organize, we win. Please unmute your phones, unmute your microphones, and say it with me. When we organize,
We win.
Say it again. When we organize,
We win.
We win.
when we organize,
We win.
We win.
good night, brothers and sisters.